Hello and welcome to another Get to Know. And my name's Brett Baker. And on behalf of Denis Wick Products, it's great to welcome Kirk Garrison, who we're going to talk to today and just find out a little bit more information from. So, hello, Kirk. The first question to you is so, whereabouts do you live in the United States and why do you live there?
I live in actually Northwest Indiana, right outside of Chicago, Illinois. The reason I'm in Northwest Indiana is because property taxes are cheaper. But there's plenty of work in Chicago. And when I was in the service, I was separating from the service in the early 90s and was looking for places with larger markets to work as a professional musician and make a living. My last duty station was in Omaha, Nebraska, which is a lovely community, but there's not a lot of work there for brass players, or not enough. And I started looking to the coasts, and I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in southern Minnesota, and I speak the language here. So my decision was made to come to Chicago. I had a connection. Late jazz pianist composer Frank Mantooth had come through the Air Force Base and done a couple of clinics, and he encouraged me to come out here. And so I came out to his home and looked around, and he said, "Why don't you go check out DePaul University?" And I said, "Well, I'm in my early 30s. I got a wife and two kids. I don't know if I want to go back to school." And he said, "Just go check it out." So I did, and I had it. At that time, we had a cassette tape for auditions.
Yeah.
We weren't into the CDs yet, the early 90s. And director of jazz studies there, Bob Lark, who we have since become very close friends, said, "Well, what would it take to get you to come to school here?" And I said, "Lots of money, because I don't have a lot. I've got a wife, two kids." He says, "Okay." And they gave me a full tuition waiver to finish my bachelor's and master's degrees concurrently there. So it turned out pretty well, but I had to tell my wife, "Well, we're going to move to Chicago. I'm going to be a musician and go to grad school full time." She said, "Okay, let's go." And it all worked out just fine. In the early 90s, mid 90s, commercial work was jumping here. It was very, very busy. I immediately got into doing lots of TV and radio commercials and things like that. And that was really happening. And we had a lot of event bands here. In Chicago, they call them jobbing bands, and we would play corporate parties and weddings, whatever. And they were busy and prolific, and they paid very, very well. So while I was in graduate school, I was able to support my family by just performing in the Chicago area, because it was and still is pretty active. It's not like it was in the 90s, but that's why I moved here. And it's always been a great brass town, and there's such a great history of players here, both on the jazz and the classical side of music. But sitting behind me, I got Vincent Chikowitz's book. His son Michael Chikowitz publishes a lot of material, his dad's books, and I just played with Mike last week, as a matter of fact, and Reynold Schilke, and of course Bud Herseth and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. Those are wonderful.
Oh, excellent. No, that is really interesting to see how you got yourself to where you are there. And what do you think inspired you to remain with your instrument? Did you play other instruments, or have you always stayed on one?
I started on trumpet in late elementary school, like everyone else did, and then I quit for a short time because I thought I wanted to play sports. And then in about 8th grade, I realized I wasn't going to have a growth spurt, and that I was going to go back to music. And that's exactly what I did. All my parents had was an old, beat up, rusty Olds Ambassador cornet, because they had 6 kids in a small, Midwestern community in southern Minnesota. And so that's what I played on for quite a while. I had a 3C mouthpiece, and the shank didn't fit in there properly, and it didn't matter. I just played it anyway. And actually, my band director, his name was Michael Wolfile, and we're still friends. He was an inspiration. He was a saxophone player. And I went to him the summer after my 8th grade year, and I said, "I want to start playing again in band." And he said, "Okay, I'll give you lessons over the summer, and let's see how you do." And then in your freshman year in high school. So I did, and I excelled. And first time I played for him, he just said, "Have you been playing your horn?" during this time? And I said, no. And he was telling me just how he thought that my sound was just unbelievably good, especially with that equipment. And so I saved money and mowed lawns and worked odd jobs in the summer to make enough money so that I could buy my own trumpet. And I bought a used, I can't even remember. It was an Olds Special trumpet, and it was nickel plated. I think I got that my junior year in high school. And I also played electric bass. My older brother was a tuba player and a bass player, and I didn't want to carry a tuba. So I thought bass would be okay. I'm not carrying that thing. And so I learned, it really helped with my understanding of harmony, learning to play the bass in jazz, which is why probably I excelled in that area. So my high school band director had a lot to do with me getting back into the fold as a musician, and lots of just great guidance from him. And I would go down during study halls and listen to records. He always had records down there of jazz bands and jazz musicians and classical trumpet players. And he had all this great stuff. And I would just sit there and listen and pick up on that stuff. And I think everybody in music ends up with somebody that has touched your life as a band director, usually pretty early on. And then, yes, there are always some later that come into your life. But I think that was what got me playing. And pretty much my entire career then with that 3C cornet mouthpiece, I've pretty much been on something close to that my entire career. I'm not one of those, I don't have a drawer full of mouthpieces here. I have a couple extra ones, but I've never done that fishing for the right. I just figure I'll fix it in the practice room.
Yeah.
And that's the way I've been, and pretty much on that. So I did go through the weak moment where I bought something shallow because I thought it would help me play in the upper register. And then I threw it away because my sound was like a kazoo down in the staff. But that's the reason I think that I picked the trumpet and stayed on the trumpet, because it was a good fit. It's what we had.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, excellent. And was there something, a particular event that you feel improved you as a player or led you to think this is going to be the rest of my life?
There are several, I think. But, well, one thing that inspired me to be a trumpet player is my brother, my oldest brother, who was about 9 years older than I. And of course, I idolized him when I was a kid. He played very, very well. And that, I want to be like my big brother. Matter of fact, that was his cornet, and I kept it for quite a few years, and I finally gave it back to him because he says, "Hey, I want that thing back." So I said, "I've got enough now, so you're fine." But I had several events. I think the very first really big one was my high school band director, of course. I went to college at Mankato State University. It is now Minnesota State University in southern Minnesota. My trumpet teacher there was Tom Giles. He was marvelous. I remember sitting in his studio and listening to his tone when he played, and how some of those notes were so resonant, they almost hurt, because they were so, and they weren't loud. They were just beautiful. And so I started trying to pattern my sound after that. And I played in the jazz band there, played in the Wind Symphony. And then this trumpet player, this studio guy from Los Angeles that I had never heard of at the time when I was about 18 or 19, Bobby Shue, came and did a guest performance at Mankato State. And from that day forward, I want to do that. I heard him play and just knocked me out. And the beautiful story about that is, fast forward to when I moved to Chicago in the late 90s, or in the 90s, earlier mid 90s. I toured with Frank Mantooth and played on his last big band recording before he unfortunately passed away. And in the trumpet section, Bobby Shue. And so it was so great. We went on the road for a short time, and we did the recording, and I told him that story, and he was really touched. And we've been very good friends ever since. As a matter of fact, Bobby Shue has donated his library to Elmhurst University, and I've got Bobby Shue's sitting in boxes in my office waiting for me to sort through, but there's 8 boxes of great arrangements, and I've got to get that done. So he was a big inspiration. But I think, being a young, not terribly mature person at that point, I didn't realize what it was going to take to get to that point, to where Bobby was. And I did audition I failed the first audition for the Air Force Band, and then I was successful in the second audition. And I got in and I was playing and I was, oh, okay, I've kind of made it now. Not really, but that's what I thought in my head. I'm going, oh yeah, I'm a pretty good trumpet player. Then I realized, they got me running sound and singing quite a bit and playing in the jazz band, playing solos, because my reading wasn't where it needed to be. My improvisation was good, but not enough. And I finally decided, number one, I had to do an adjustment to my embouchure. I was playing a little too low. I was making a good sound, but my upper register wasn't happening like I liked it to. I would get up to like an E flat and shoot an air ball, because my lip wasn't in the mouthpiece properly. So I decided over one Christmas, took 4 weeks of leave, and I said, okay, here's your new embouchure. And I put it on where it was supposed to be and started over for 4 weeks and played nothing but lower register Clarks and Arbans and everything like that, and scales and long tones. By the end of the 4 weeks, I was playing double Fs and Gs like there was nothing to it, but I sounded like crap below below a G in the staff. I had to completely rework that part of the horn. But I came back and I was, oh, you're going to play lead in the jazz band. And I was so inspired by what that did. We would have rehearsals in the morning, and then sometimes we'd have part of the afternoon free, 4 or 5 hours a day for quite a period of time, working on that lower register, working on my improvisation skills to where I was really playing what I was supposed to play, as opposed to playing exclusively by ear, working on exercises. And I think that was my biggest growth period. And then when I got out of the service and went back to DePaul, and I had wonderful applied teachers there, and studied with the late Larry Novak. I studied with Paul McKee. I studied with Bob Lark, of course, and really learned a lot from all those guys. It's really hard to take a jazz lesson with a piano player, and he says, we're only going to talk in concert pitch. And I'm on my B flat trumpet. I'm going, oh, my brain. I would stop by this little pub around the corner after my lessons with Larry Novak on Wednesdays and just look at the bubbles in the beer for about 45 minutes and go, what just happened? I learned so much in those lessons. It was just unbelievable.
He was fantastic.
A master teacher. So that was kind of like the impetus to my, just becoming better, and really working on things. And again, physically as a player, when I changed my embouchure, I also completely changed how much pressure I use when I play. I use very little. My finger, my pinky, rarely, if ever, almost never goes into the octave key. That you got that hook that you just press as hard as you can.
Yeah, the octave key.
I'll be playing in the upper register, and it looks like I'm drinking tea. I got my pinky up in the air and trying to stay out. The only time is when I'm using a plunger. I have to put it in there to hold the instrument. But learning how to use way less pressure when I play, it's almost counterintuitive as you go up in the upper register, but it's also works. You go, there's no way this is going to work, and it works, and it works very well. So those periods of improvement, I mean, I can still mark them on my calendar, and we all, I think, as brass players, will have those couple of events in our lives that make that happen.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Huh.
They just make us better. And I always say that when I was wanted to become a trumpet player, I just wanted to pursue a life of frustration and crippling self-doubt for the rest of my life, because that's kind of what it becomes sometimes.
Oh, that's fabulous. Which brings me neatly on to the next question, which is, how do the products that you use, whether it be the mutes, mouthpieces, the instrument, the combination, how do they affect your ability to continue to grow as a player?
Well, when Denis Wick first started really marketing trumpet mouthpieces, primarily low brass early on, with Denis being the marvelous player that he is. And then as they started marketing the trumpet mouthpieces in the US, Denis came here, and I got a lesson with Mr. Wick, which was wonderful. And one of the marketing people from Danzer USA, which is the Denis Wick distributor, was asking me about becoming an artist for Denis Wick. And I said, I'd love to try some. I said, if I can find one off the shelf that I like, that's what I'm playing, because I don't do I don't do customized mouthpieces because if you lose it, you're in big trouble. So you just go to the store and pick one off the shelf. So Denis, he's just so knowledgeable. I was just amazed just to sit down with him. I probably learned more in that 45 minutes to an hour than I had my entire career. And he was watching my breathing, and he really liked the way I was doing everything. And then he MM4C right away. He said, "This is going to be a great fit for you." And pretty much, I've tried some of the other Denis Wick mouthpieces, but that MM4C is perfect for getting a great sound as a commercial player, but also being able to blend if you get on the rare occasion that I'm playing in a more of a classical ensemble. Usually when I'm playing in a classical ensemble, I play in the lower part of the section to stay out of the way of the guys that know what they're doing. You're not going to hear me play. I'm not playing Petrushka. It's not going to happen. That's not my thing. I do know some of the 20th century repertoire, the Artunian and things like that, the more modern pieces, they're in my repertoire. But like playing the Haydn and the Hummel, they're wonderful pieces of music and I can play them, but I'd rather let other guys play them that play them way better than I. So, I teach them to my students on occasion, but I stay away from that. But that MM4C, I can do everything that I need to do on my trumpet playing that. Now, granted, it's a little bit larger mouthpiece and to accommodate playing in the extreme register, but I just deal with it because it's all about sound for me. And yeah, I can put something else in there. I do have a tool that I use if I have to do something crazy. Like we had a band in Chicago here, and we were doing the Duke Ellington sacred concerts, and I had to do the part of the extreme high trumpet work. And I said, "Yeah, we're not going to do that on the MM4C. I'll just stick this in here." And I worked on that mouthpiece for a while as a tool, and then I put it back, put it away, and don't look at it again until somebody asks me to do that again. But that MM4C that's it. That's all I use. And then the mutes, of course. So from a sales standpoint, you're not going to sell me very many mouthpieces because I only use the one. So I have one in a spare, and that's been most of my students. I have quite a few students, jazz students, that will use the MM4C because it's so versatile. And in the university setting, when they're playing in concert wind ensemble, they can use that, still get their nice, rich sound. And it's a superior mouthpiece, I think. And I experimented with the American Classic 3C. Very nice. Very nice. Actually, they all play great. Just it wasn't what I needed, for the MM4C does everything I need. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. And I think all of the trumpet mouthpieces, many of my colleagues around here, even more and more colleagues around here using the trombone mouthpieces and other trumpet mouthpieces. And Chris O'Hara was another one of our artists. He's our classical trumpet teacher at Elmhurst University. He's doing a marvelous job. Andy Baker, a Londoner who came to the U.S., he's using Denis Wick. So a lot of my colleagues, that I'm good friends with, are using the product. And I think, and the mutes are great. That Harman mute, I'm probably, when we get done here, I need to record a track for a recording, and I'm going to do some solo obligato stuff behind the singer. And that mute, the Harman, or whatever they call it, Denis Wick calls it, is it the Buzz-Wah mute? I can't even remember.
Yeah, Harman. Yeah, it's a Harman.
Harman is good. Yeah, we're safe. But that instrument, or that mouthpiece, whether it's but tight on the microphone, it really works well to do some recording like that, to do some obligato. I can still get the buzz, but I don't have to play so loud to get that quality, and it still has a richness to it. It's an excellent mute. It's well designed. And then the cup, of course, they're wonderful. No real weird pitch, no weirder than normal pitch issues that you get when you stick something in the end of your horn, because it's going to happen. So they work really well. And then I actually used the flugelhorn mouthpiece, the super deep one, the 4BFL, the huge throat. Can't play above about a B flat on it, but you shouldn't be doing that on flugelhorn anyway. So, it's perfect. And it gets a gorgeous sound. Having that big of a throat. There's the inherent intonation issues with flugelhorn, because no flugelhorn really plays in tune anyway. But the tone, and I'll deal with some little intonation issues. I actually use Schilke trumpets and flugelhorns. That's the brand that I use, and I'm one of their artists here in Chicago, and they're wonderful instruments. And the mouthpieces are a good match, actually, for the Schilkes. So, and I know Schilke makes their own mouthpieces, but I'm staying with mine. I told them that when I became an artist, I said, I'm not changing mouthpieces. They said, okay, we're good.
Oh, that's fabulous. And then finally, who inspired you more? Was it the peers, people from school or college, or was it the teachers or recordings? Or I have to bring in these days YouTube, because everybody seems to be on that.
Really, all of the above, probably except YouTube. I haven't really done much of that, but I've had a lot of really great colleagues and players that I've learned so much. I mentioned my high school band director and Bobby Shue. Of course, we became friends, and then the folks that I studied with at DePaul. When I moved to Chicago, there was a trumpet player here who has since passed away. His name was Danny Barber. Toured with Maynard Ferguson, and he had that fat, beautiful, rich lead sound that I just love. And when I came here, Danny kind of took me under his wing, and he was on a lot of these studio recordings. And then I subbed for him on a couple of things, and he was a great help to my career in Chicago. Then, of course, on recordings, oh my gosh, Miles Davis for his musicianship and beautiful sound. Clifford Brown, I hate him. He's so good. And his body of work over such a short period of time, I still marvel at Clifford Brown. Chet Baker and his melodic sense and harmonic sense is another that was a real inspiration to me. There was a late tenor saxophonist from Los Angeles that I started working with at a music camp when I was in the Air Force, and we remained friends and did several recordings together. Roger Newman, tenor player from Los Angeles, who passed just like 4 years ago, I think. Always, every year I would see him at the camp, and then we started doing things in between, and he'd go, yeah, you're doing this and this. And he says, you got just a few more things to work on there, but he says, you're getting there. And then, then he started hiring me for recordings and things. I figured I'd arrived at that point to be acceptable for him to use on recordings. Another dear friend, Tom Bones Malone, who was on the road with the Blues Brothers and stuff. Tom and I have done a lot of things together, and he's been a real inspiration as a musician, a trombone player, and all the stuff that he has done. We would be on the road somewhere, and I would sit down to story time, and he's done really well, so he always bought dinner, so I would sit there and listen to the stories and have dinner. He's done very well. He's been a great friend and a real inspiration to me. So and then, of course, some of the lead players, Bud Brisbois and some of the guys from the old New York recordings from the 60s. They're all marvelous. And current trumpet players, Frank Green, he's unbelievably great, marvelous player. There are so many. Marquise Hill, he's terrific. He was actually in my band at DePaul when I was teaching there for a short time. So I had Marquise Hill. We did a lot of trumpet features because he was so great already then. And when we would get into musical discussions, and, he's really doing well, world renowned musician now. Sean Jones, trumpet player, another great one. So there are a lot, and I'm probably forgotten more than I'll remember. We'll get off and I'll go, oh yeah. And then there was blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And
that's fantastic.
My university teacher, Tom Giles, of course, was probably the one that took me from being an okay high school trumpet player to being a better than okay university level player, and then on into my professional career. I think my growth was kind of slow. I wasn't playing like a great professional player would be playing in my early 20s yet. I wasn't there yet. I wasn't there until I was in my mid to late 20s, I would say. And then it started, and I still haven't arrived. Of course, none of us have. We're all still trying to figure this thing out, blow into the small end and see what comes out. And that's pretty much our lives, and that's what works out well for us. So
And that's a brilliant quote to finish on. So no, thank you very much for that. We'll
Yes.
put that in the headline.
Put that in the headline. Yeah, make me sound intelligent if you can. So if you can edit that, if you can edit that to make it look. I have a great editor. I write some articles for Downbeat magazine, and I'll send it to. I go, Ed, make me sound like I know what the heck I'm talking about, and I speak the Queen's English.
Well, thanks for your time, and thank you very much.